Reddit, what's your family's dark secret? My uncle was investigated for the Green River killings. Years later he was investigated for the Spokane prostitute murders. He was good friends with Yates, who was found guilty, and his saliva was found on a beer can near a dumping site. When I was a little girl, my mom told me to never get in his car if he tried to pick me up. Funny enough, he sells life insurance. My great-aunt had a second child, and gave it up for adoption because she was a newly single woman, and didn't think she could provide for both kids. This apparently caused a lot of drama in our family back in the 70s, and people stopped talking to each other over it. My generation never heard a single word of any of this. Then, one day, my mom calls me to tell me about my new cousin. I was baffled, and figured someone had a kid. Nope, that little girl that was given up for adoption was now in her 40s, and hired a private investigator to find her biological family. She's since been assimilated into the family, and I see her regularly at family events. My great-grandfather was a Christian Scientist minister. They believe that the mind can cure the body, and he told the family of a girl with diabetes, a treatable disease, to pray the sickness away. The girl soon died, and the girl's father killed my great-grandfather in a murderous rage. My grandparents swapped spouses. My grandmother on my mother's side had an affair with my grandfather on my father's side. Everyone got divorced, and then my grandfather on my mother's side fell in love, and married my grandmother on my father's side. Family reunions were fun. My paternal grandma got pregnant with my dad when she was something like 17 in a small town in northern Louisiana. She claimed my grandpa was abusive, so she and her sisters took off for New Mexico when she was 19, and my dad was a little less than 2. On the way she surprise delivered my uncle, who bears little resemblance to my dad. Obviously mom is same. She then very openly carried on an affair with her 60-ish-year-old boss until she met my step-grandpa. He was a great guy, raised my dad and uncle as if they were his own. As the story goes, step-grandpa is overjoyed when grandma gets pregnant with his baby. But my aunt comes out bearing a remarkable resemblance to grandma's boss. Boss's wife shows up to the happy house with a gun and a checkbook. Says she's using one or the other to go away. So in like 1961 my grandma gets a check for something like $10,000, and she and step-grandpa buy a brand new house. All good, right? Nope, grandma had innumerable more affairs, was married twice more, and my step-grandpa felt so betrayed after he raised all 3 kids he committed suicide. Grandma tried to swoop in and take over his Social Security survivor benefits somehow. Right before grandma died a few years ago she kicked her last husband out, cleaned out their joint savings, and she and my aunt and cousins took off for Arkansas. Right after I was born my real grandpa shows up on our doorstep with little boxes full of letters, birthday cards, newspaper clippings of my dad's activities like sports, and getting his PhD. Grandma had gone through all of them, and taken the cash and checks, and kept them for herself, and just to be cruel returned the remnants. Turns out grandpa was a great guy who was never abusive, missed his son like crazy, and was always working blue-collar jobs so could never really get away. Grandma actually bolted when she was 19 because she'd had an affair with the local Buick salesman, and his wife came only with a gun, no checkbook. Edit: wow, this blew up. Little worried to check the comments. I guess to add, my grandma was very sweet to me, and before I knew all the inside drama I just knew her as a very attractive older woman who smoked a lot, but otherwise was a pretty typical grandma. She was also a great mother-in-law to my mom, and one of my brothers has severe autism, and my grandma was amazing with him. So she's very much a mix but face depending on who you were in her life. I was a little hurt when she took off for the last time because she cut my dad and his family completely out, and we don't know why. We only heard she died from my great aunt. From the pictures I've seen she was stunningly gorgeous. Had she been born a millennial she'd have made a perfect Instagram influencer, so I think getting men to do her bidding came very natural to her. My father raped my 15-year-old sister on my 6th birthday. I had nightmares my entire childhood about her being sent away, seeing my dad arrested, and worse. My mother and aunt covered it up, and didn't tell me the truth until I was in my early 20s. Edit 2. Protect all children. Thanks for everything, but this is most important. Smile. Edit. This got some serious attention already. I appreciate everyone's comments, and I've tried to respond. I want to say something about this sister of mine because I've spoken from my POV. But she's at the center of this. When I was 6 I'm sure I adored my mother. But, you know who I remember taking care of me? My oldest sister. She was my favorite person. She read to me about Tom Thumb, and sung to me, and I was pretty literally her real live baby doll. When this happened, she disappeared, and I didn't know why. When we reconciled, I got to tell her what I remember about her, and I got to hug her, but she can never truly understand how I pined for her my entire childhood, and how I still do. I'm 46, and she's 55 now. We don't live close, and I haven't seen her in 15 years. She won't see this, but I love you, sis. I always have, and I always will. A super distant uncle in my family used to get in a lot of trouble with cops. My nan and great aunt used to hide him, once hiding him in a freezer while cops searched the house. One day he ended up kidnapping an ambassador, successfully ransomed him off, tried escaping the country via boat, but the captain realized he was a crook, and tried to take him to the cops. Distant uncle instead holds captain at gunpoint, and dives off the boat several kilometers off land. Police never found him, and assumed he drowned. Decades later my nan got a letter from him, confirming to all of us he was alive, and well. Great-grandmother ran a brothel. Great-grandfather was murdered by brothers who decided they were both in love with my great-grandmother. Great-grandfather was in the KKK. The KKK was quoted in the newspaper as saying something like, "We take care of our own." The brothers were never seen or heard from again. Edit. Brothers were two siblings, unrelated to my family, and not members of the KKK. I don't know how they planned to divide time with great-grandmother. Also, when my grandfather helped lay out my great-grandfather for burial, 9 bullets fell out of my great-grandfather. My mom was raped when she was 14. Her dad, my granddad, tracked the guy down, and shot him dead in a bar. My grandfather died in 1946, before my dad was even born. We were always told he drove his truck into a ditch while drunk, fell asleep, and asphyxiated when the tailpipe got clogged with mud. He was in his early 30s at the time. Well, I got into genealogy a couple of years back, and found a bunch of records and newspaper articles about the incident. Turns out Grandpa wasn't alone in the truck. He was with an underage girl, less than half his age, who also died alongside him. Obviously, this was not my grandmother. The newspapers didn't say it explicitly, but there was heavy insinuation that there was some side of the road romance happening when the fumes apparently overtook both of them. I still haven't told my dad what I found. Not sure I ever will. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell for more stories delivered to you. Thanks for listening. See you later.